Welcome, Jared Staab. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly,
Oh,
but
you got it right.
I got it right. Sweet. He is the Senior Director of Education at StoryFind Films. And yeah, so I was researching a little bit. I saw that you watched too many movies growing up, I guess, and this brought you to
It hasn't stopped.
okay, your place storytelling, but based on the films that you watched. I love that. And I love how you're now using that to help people and organizations really find and craft their own stories, in the best way possible using
Oh,
education, psychology, and marketing. So yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing so you can share your slides with us and we'll let you get started. Um, if he's still there.
apologize. Y'all hear me?
We hear you.
All right. Sorry for that momentary lag.
No problem. I'll let you go ahead and take it away then.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. And share the sound. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, Jenna. I am incredibly happy to be here today. Thank you all for joining me. I'm excited to share our team's approach to finding your most impactful stories. As Jenna said, I am Jared Staab, and she said that correctly. I'm the Senior Director of Education and a storyteller with StoryFind Films. My teammate, fearless leader, Kristen Sucraw, she published a book, and it was just last year, a start-to-finish storytelling guide called StoryFind, the handbook for finding and telling your nonprofit's most impactful stories. And I'm thrilled to be able to share some highlights from that book, as well as some great storytelling techniques today for y'all to have. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in. All right, so overview for the day. We're going to do three things. We're going to talk about the power of story. We're going to talk about laying a really solid foundation for great storytelling through the creation of a messaging strategy together. And then going to go on a story hunt. All right, so the power of story. You're all here because you know that it's important. When done well, stories do so many different things for your organization. If you want somebody to act, what do? You tell a story. Okay, quick personal story here. So we've got three kids. Often my wife and I divide and conquer with the kids' activities. Just last week, I was home with my son while my wife was at a club meeting with my 6-year-old daughter. And this is a club that fundraises and helps out other causes. Anyway, my wife texted me during the meeting. She said this: one of the teenage girls here has cancer. They found a lesion just in January. She had to have her leg amputated and is going through chemo. She's here tonight, continuing on, and it's amazing. Now, I didn't know how to respond. I just had to sit with that. It just reverberated in my chest. I mean, we're all aware of pediatric cancer, and it's very easy to empathize and have a heart for kids and families going through that. But my wife telling me this story via text about a girl in our club who, as a member, has done her part to help out others, but now could use our help. I mean, sign me up, take my money. How can we help this girl, this family, this cause? Whatever. Let's do it. Suddenly, without realizing it, yeah, I'm the audience. I'm the donor suddenly because this story just became personal to me. So, really fast, the takeaway is clear. A cause with a person whose backstory full of tragedy and triumph that personally connects to your audience, it pulls people in. Second takeaway is also loud and clear too. It's that apparently my wife needs to be in marketing because she didn't even have a direct ask for me. I was just ready to give. So she's got a whole other career that she needs to pursue. All right. Well, there's a journalist, Rob Walker. He wanted to test whether storytelling was the most effective resource out there. So he thrifted a whole bunch of small items at the average cost of about $1.25 per item. I think it was like $130 for the lot. He then resold those same objects on eBay with stories attached to the item descriptions for nearly $8,000. Stories heal, they unite, they inspire, they create change, they inform. And just as Rob Walker pointed out, they're literally the oldest business strategy in the book. Make them personal and see how much further you can go. And you know what? It's our honor to use this art form at StoryFind Films. We're a film production company that works with nonprofits across the world helping them find and tell their stories in a way that moves our audiences to action because they personally connect with them. Okay, so to lay the foundation of my session here, I want to introduce you to our friend Rita. She was a student at Concordia College in Alabama. She bravely shared her story with us over the course of like 2 hours. The end result, it's just like a 2-minute video. The project was for the school's foundation to help them raise money so they could keep serving students like Rita. Now I'm going to reference her throughout the entirety of my session. So I want to show you her video first, then we're going to dive into the specifics of how you can find your own Rita. And we will hope for no further streaming issues or anything. Here we go.
I remember when I was in high school and we got ready to graduate. And I went to my counselor, and she told me that I was not college material. And she said that I should take a job at the factory because I should not apply to any colleges because I would not make it. I believed her. Dr. McNair Ramsey, he was the pastor at Emmanuel Lutheran Church. And he said, hey, he said, are you in college? And I said, no, sir, I never even thought about college. He said, you ever heard of Concordia? No. And he said, we're going to bring some teachers. He said, would you be interested if we brought some teachers to the church to have some classes like during the week or whatever? Sure. That's how I got interested in what education really was all about. You know, it wasn't just about books and stuff. It was about somebody caring enough and then seeing something in you and wanted you to be your best. Dr. Ramsey has been with me since the beginning. I remember when I started back to school, doing my last 2 years, a few years ago, he had gotten really, really sick. And I said, I'm back in school. And he said, you know what, if it's God's will, I'll be at your graduation. And he was there. He was the first face that I saw when I walked through those doors. I can look at the kids in my classroom and tell them, it does not matter where you started. It does not matter. That does not have to be where you end up. But that's what I've learned from coming to Concordia. I did not believe in myself. Not until I started here. And I want to instill that in somebody else's child.
All right, so that's Rita. She is an amazingly powerful storyteller in her own right. But thankfully, we've got a good team who knows how to find storytellers like Rita and then what to do with those stories, how to shape them, create them into something that will move an audience to give as a result of what they just experienced. And, Rita's production value, it's pretty simple. We're just there in a chapel. It looks good. We just sat her down and we were off to the races. It doesn't have to be fancy as long as you have the core tenets of story in place. So that's what we want to talk about today. Storytelling is collaborative. There's an author, her name's Kendra Hall. She has a book called Stories That Stick. She talks about how telling stories takes at least two people. It takes the person telling the story, so there's Rita telling her story out into the world, and also takes an audience to receive her story. Pretty basic stuff, we all know this. So Rita talked about when she went into her high school guidance counselor's office, that woman there told her she's not college material. I mean, how many of you can relate to being told maybe you're not quite good enough? I know I can. It's been told to me my whole life in various forms. So as Rita is sharing her story, we as the audience, we're overlaying our own meaning and our own shared experiences onto her story. And it becomes this beautiful, collaborative, and personal thing. The other piece of what makes storytelling so beautiful is kind of how our minds create imagery to pair with a story. Rita talked about how she was told to get a job at the sewing factory. Now, we didn't see the sewing factory, but our minds start to create imagery around it. Maybe you saw the inside of the sewing factory, where she might have ended up working her whole life. Maybe you saw the outside of it. We create images that pair with the words of the storyteller, and it becomes this incredible collaboration as we allow ourselves to become an active part of creating their worlds within our own mind. And, that's why storytelling is such a powerful marketing and fundraising tool. Our audience's worlds become intertwined with the worlds of our storytellers. They overlay their own meaning on top of our stories, and they actively participate. They get pulled in, that personal impact in the storytelling process through the creation of their own visual world. Then, at the end of the day, we ask them to do something as a result of what they just experienced. And personally, they're invested. Okay, so we're going to workshop just a little bit here. How do you find storytellers like Rita? Because there is an art form that goes into finding the right voices for your organization. It's not luck. We didn't just show up on campus, find Rita, sit her down and ask her, please give us an amazing story. No, there are so many great things that came first and so many things that you can do to find your own Ritas. And it all starts with the basics. Every time you're going to share a story with the world, start with the creation of a messaging strategy first, wherein you're going to answer 4 mission critical questions. All right, so first up, what are your goals for telling the story that you're going to tell? What do you hope to accomplish? What do you need to find a storyteller? Because let's be honest, sometimes stories, that can be an investment. And you want to make sure that when you set out to tell a story, you're going to tell the story that's actually going to drive your audience to do something at the end of the day, because you've made it personal for them. So figure out what your goals are with the story you're telling. Second one, it's something, everybody kind of skips sometimes because it can seem a little ambiguous, but you also want to define success. How will you know at the end of the day that the story you told was successful? How will you know if you actually accomplished your goal? People skip this one a lot, but it's vitally important because over time, you want to make sure that your resources are being spent in the most effective way possible. So those are the first 2. Then we've got, who is your audience? Know your audience before you go out and find a story so that you're just not hoping you'll find, that storyteller that'll connect with them. Do your homework. Who's in your audience? What are they like? What have they responded to in the past? How can you connect with them personally? What will make them feel like you are talking directly to them? Ohio State University conducted a study a while ago on basic human desires involving more than 6,000 participants. They found that 16 basic desires guide nearly all meaningful behavior. Now think about that. No matter how many segments you divide your audience into, your donors, 16 core human desires motivate us all. I'm going to tick them off for you right now. Don't try and write them down. It's all right. There's power, independence, curiosity, acceptance, order, saving, honor, idealism, social contact, family, status, vengeance, romance, eating, physical exercise, and tranquility. Understanding which of these desires is most important to your audience means you actually have the chance to make a profound impact on both their hearts and minds, resulting in more good that you can do in the world. There's so much power in speaking to the core desires of specific groups. I mean, if we look at Rita's story from the fundraising angle as it was used, donors could relate directly to Rita if they saw themselves in her, in the independence she gained, her improved status, the honoring of her mentor. So there you go, those desires: independence, status, mentor, or rather honoring. There are a lot of elements to grab onto that had an impact on Concordia's donors. And you can use these common denominators to shape how you tell a story and use the language correctly in the storyteller you select and the call to action you place at the end. This is how you shape your story for your audience to make it personal to them. And last but not least, if you take nothing else away from the messaging strategy, every story that you tell needs to contain one big idea. You got one shot to make your audience remember one thing about who you are and what you do. So we work with a lot of organizations who have multiple departments, and sometimes they set out to do a campaign. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. Maybe you signed off on a storytelling initiative and you have people approaching saying, hey, can you mention this? Well, can you just mention our Thanksgiving food drive? Can you mention our summer camps? Can you make sure that you give a nod to this program, that program, on and on? Or maybe better yet, you hear, well, you can tell this story, but you also have to tell this one over here too. You end up making what we call a pot of stew. It's essentially nothingness. It's so cluttered with so many voices. Your audience, they just completely disregard it and they just shut off all the noise. One time we were working with a university in the heart of New York City. We had this wonderful marketing director who we were working with. We filled out the master plan, had our one big idea in place. We showed up, we filmed some lovely interviews, and then she decided to take a job at another school. We were left with our new point people, not person, people, a team of 9 department heads who all decided that they wanted to have a voice in the post-production process to give their input. We had, and I kid you not, over 90 comments on our first edit. Most of them even contradicted each other. because, everyone's fighting to have their piece that would serve their own initiatives in the final product. It was a comments pot of stew, if you will. But what got us all back on the same page was this. We had a master plan in place, a plan that was decided upon ahead of time. We were able to come together and say, I know that what y'all are doing is also really important, but our one big idea for this campaign is this. We can tell your story next. We can save it for something else, but for this initiative, we got to stick with the plan. And here it is, laid out black and white. So Rita's story, what you see in her video, it's just a fraction of her story. It's just the most important pieces that would serve the messaging strategy. And all of it's based on our one big idea. And that was decided upon before we ever arrived to film. Rita's one big idea was this: education changes lives. That was it. One big ideas are simple, clear, and incredibly focused. Education changes lives, not our adult learning program that has these 5 different components and you should give to each one of them. No, no, no. It's just super simple. And here's the key, and I'll say it again. We define our big ideas before we find our storytellers to connect with our audiences, to connect with our donors. And we find storytellers who support the ideas we want to communicate. Okay, so the messaging strategy is the foundation. Let's talk about actually finding those amazing storytellers. So next up, we're going to go on a story hunt and do 3 different things. You're going to make a list, conduct discovery interviews, and then select your storyteller. And each one of these things is really systematic as well. So we're going to break down each one of them together. So creating a list, it all starts with building a culture of storytelling within your organization. One of our clients does this really well. We work with an organization called Conquer Cancer. They are the fundraising arm for the American Society of Clinical Oncologists. What they do is simple. They fund cancer research. So here's Conquer Cancer over here. Here's the oncologist in the middle. And over here are the stories that they really want to tell, which are the patient stories. The people whose lives have actually been impacted by cancer research, and the stories that connect to their donor base. It makes it personal. In one way or another, we're all going to be affected by cancer in our lives if we haven't already. Conquer as an organization has done a phenomenal job of laying the groundwork with the oncologists who sit in the middle. They coach them and remind them that they, Conquer, are going to ask for patient stories. These are the type of stories that we're looking for. And it's all based on them knowing that their audience responds to this or to that they feel are personally appealing to them. By the time Conquer needs a story for a specific initiative, by the time we get involved, as a film crew, those oncologists, they're ready to supply the patient names. So when creating a list of potential storytellers, we tell people to look for people who trust you. Now, this is critically important. A lot of our work is centered on trauma-informed storytelling and taking great care of the people that we put on camera, because we often work with people who have difficult stories to tell. We're looking for people who will be empowered through sharing their story and not re-victimized. You have to find storytellers who deeply trust your organization and who believe that you will take great care of them at the end of the day. Look for people who can demonstrate vulnerability. The struggle is the story. You have to be willing to go with these people to the hard places of their story, and they, in turn, have to be willing to go to the hard places of their story with you and for you. Lots of times when a story isn't successful, it's solely because the storyteller was not able or maybe even willing to be vulnerable. So your audience needs to be able to relate. You want that personal impact. This is what you got to do. You got to remember that your audience, the donors, they need to overlay their own meaning onto the story. So that means that people have to be willing to share emotions that others can connect with. Next, look for people who can display emotion. And, this doesn't have to be like Rita, who, was in tears in her whole video. They just have to be able to make a real emotional connection with your audience. It can be joy, laughter, tears, pride, whatever. Just want to make sure that you're finding people who can let down their walls and share that emotion with the world. And finally, this is the most important one. If you're interacting with people, if your team's interacting with people and they think, hey, I bet there's more to this story, your audience is going to think so too. So think about people who you are curious about. They're going to be your best storytellers at the end of the day. So this is the criteria that you can take and equip yourself or others with as you're looking for people to tell your stories, to connect with your donors. So start adding anyone and everyone that you can think of that'd be a good fit to your list of storytellers. Now that you've made your list, you're going to conduct discovery interviews with every single person you're considering using as a storyteller. Now, discovery interviews, they're long, open-ended, and they don't go too deep emotionally. They help you uncover a lot of valuable facts and information about your storytellers. So reach out to your initial list of storytellers and ask if you can just hear their stories. Important part of this, managing expectations. So you want to let them know how their story might be used. Instead of just mentioning a project or initiative you're working on, just say that you're reaching out to gather stories of impact from your organization and that you'd like to hear their story and would they be willing to share. This allows you the freedom to just listen without wondering if you're going to hurt somebody's feelings if you decide to go in another direction. So set aside maybe about an hour for a discovery interview and plan to record your conversation. When possible, meet in person. And if you're able, record the interview using video. You can use audio alone, but you're going to miss out on some kind of like nonverbal body language that might help you as you shape your story. I understand that meeting in person is kind of a luxury these days. So recording a video session through an online platform also works totally effective. And discovery interviews, they're also amazing in another way, not just because you discover so many great things about your storyteller, but also about your organization itself, which is really cool. So you're going to learn, what is this person's story? Sometimes a story's been told so many times about that by the time it reaches you, it might be a little different than it actually is. So you'll learn whether or not there's actually a story there. The next important piece is you will learn whether or not someone's story aligns with your master plan. When we went to Concordia, for example, there were so many amazing stories we found through our discovery process, but they didn't necessarily fit with the one big idea that education changes lives. As much as you may want to follow those stories and tell them anyway, put them on a shelf for later. You'll still be able to use them, just in a different way. Make sure you stay true to what you set out to do in the first place. So how does somebody's story align with your master plan? Next, are they emotionally vulnerable? In discovery interviews, we always say we're looking for hints of emotion, but we're not taking people all the way down the rabbit hole. You only get really one shot at that raw emotion. And we'll show you a snippet of Rita's discovery interview here in just a minute. She's emotional, but not like she was on production day. So we're learning and discovering whether or not people are willing to go to those hard places. We're not taking them all the way there yet, though. Finally, the most important piece, you're looking for people who have unique details to the story that an audience will remember. People still talk to us about Rita's story. It's a really old video, but years later, people still come up and say, I remember Rita's story. I remember that sewing factory that they didn't even see. I remember how that person, her mentor, came to her graduation. So look for unique details that an audience can hold on to. And that's what you'll walk away with from your discovery interviews. All of those amazing things that'll ensure your storytelling efforts are successful. Now we're going to look at some discovery interview questions. These are really broad and they're actually different from questions that you would use in an actual interview because the goal is different. With discovery interviews, the goal is in the name. Discovery, discovery, discovery. You want to see what's there. So I'm just going to go ahead and put all of them up right here. Make sure they all show up. Great. So you can ask, tell me your story in its broadest sense. This gets people talking and you can learn what they see as what's most important to them. How did your story impact you emotionally? If they're not, willing to go to those emotional places on their own, you can help them by just asking a question like this. What is something you want people to know about your story? This question is key for getting those unique details because it gets beneath the surface of what events occurred and into the heart of things. Don't forget to ask how you helped, how your organization helped, what would have been like for them if you hadn't been there. Finally, what does your journey mean to you? That's a question we like to ask everyone, and we usually save it for last. We ask that in discovery interviews because it will wrap up your story. It'll give it meaning, closure, and hope. It'll be the why to the what and give you some of the most profound thoughts your storytellers will have. Now, I said it earlier, but I want to reiterate. We always film our discovery interviews. They're usually done via Zoom, and the recordings are what help us shape a story structure and help us know what emotions to touch on later in the actual interview. Often, you can watch back through them and see places that maybe you didn't catch in the moment that were emotional to a person, and then you can draw that out during your actual interview. Okay, so you've created your list, got your list of names of people who think might be great. You've gone out into the world, conducted all your discovery interviews with them. How do you pick? How do you choose? I know some of you might be thinking, well, I'm not going to have that problem. Maybe I'll just get one person who's okay. But honestly, As you start to build that culture of storytelling within your organization, you're going to start having amazing stories to tell. And, hopefully a year from now, you're able to say, choosing my storyteller is my biggest problem because we got too many to count. Okay, so picking your storyteller. You've come back from your discovery interviews. How do you pick the person that's going to be the best? When we went to Concordia, came back with 20 potential storytellers. I think 10 of them probably would have been fantastic. We picked 3. This is the process that we work through with every organization, and we take everyone through 2 rounds of selects. Okay, so picture yourself writing everyone's name who you conducted a discovery interview with on a whiteboard. You're now going to systematically cross names off the list to make your selects, or in other words, to find your best storytellers. In the first round of selects, you're going to keep everyone's name on that whiteboard who could display warmth and emotion in their discovery interview, who possessed that natural storytelling ability, and who you had a personally deep engagement with. Because remember, if you like the person, your audience is probably going to like that person too. So we cross off anyone that doesn't fit these criteria. You're usually left with maybe like half the names. And so then on to round 2. From here, it just goes right back to that foundation, the master plan. You're going to overlay that master plan on anyone's name who's left on your list. And you're going to say, which storyteller will help us meet our goals the best? Who will our audience connect with most personally? That'll have the personal impact with them to get them to act on our organization's behalf. Who speaks the best to that one big idea? Honestly, usually with just that, your front runner will emerge. But finally, we always, at the end of the day, before we pick someone to put on camera, put their story out into the world, we ask, are they emotionally healthy? And we don't have time today to go into all the details of how to take great care of your storytellers, but in essence, you want to make sure they aren't in danger. That if they're speaking to something traumatic, they aren't currently experiencing that trauma, and that through the sharing of their story, they will experience healing. Okay, now before we move on, I want to show you Rita, just a snippet of her discovery interview. And as you're watching this, listen for and look for the reasons that maybe you would choose her. Here we go.
So yeah, college wasn't
No,
on your
no,
in your
no.
eyesight.
I was told in high school that I should not consider college by my counselor. There was a sewing factory in Monrovia, Vanity Fair,
Okay.
and my counselor told me to consider working at Vanity Fair and not consider going to college, even though I graduated in the top 10% of my class. That was not the encouragement there. So that's what I did when I graduated high school. Went to work at the sewing plant.
So Rita, as I'm sure you just saw, she was chosen for her natural storytelling ability, her warmth and emotion, the personal engagement we had with her, and the alignment she had with our overall master plan. And I've got one more clip that I just want to include for y'all to see. And it's what I saw and learned behind the camera as I was directing. And it's this. Your storytellers, they want to share their stories. They want to connect with your audience.
Thank you. You don't know what you've done. You don't know what you've done for me. You just don't know.
Well, thank you for
Golly.
sharing.
You white people, I tell you, know what to do, Joe. Know what to do, Joe. Gosh, I'll just pull stuff out of people.
Sometimes people think no one's going to want to share. No, they want to. And at the end of the day, you're giving people a gift by asking them to share their stories with you. It's giving them the opportunity of using what they've been through to give back into the world in some way. And that's what happened with Rita at the end of her interview. Okay, and so that's it. Finding your most impactful stories to connect and impact your donor base in the most significant way possible. And, this all occurs kind of like in these 3 steps. It's the power of story and understanding that. It's creating a master plan to guide you. And finally, going on a story hunt where you create a list, conduct discovery interviews, and methodically select a storyteller. So all of this and so much more can be found in the book that I mentioned earlier, my boss's book, StoryFind, the handbook for finding and telling your nonprofit's most impactful stories. It is literally a step-by-step process of what we go through at StoryFind that'll lead you directly to storytelling success. I'm also going to put this up. So if you want a master plan template delivered right to your inbox, scan this QR code here and it'll arrive shortly. If it doesn't, please reach out to us right here. But that's what I've got. Thank y'all so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Jared. That was wonderful and so powerful to hear Rita's story. And yeah, I imagine there are just so many stories out there that our attendees could, tap into for their organizations. There's one question from Robert. Can you have too many great stories?
Goodness, no. What you want to start doing is just collecting all of them, kind of building your own story vault, catalog them, create a database, whatever, hold on to them, because then you can just go back to them time and time again, find them like, hey, for this initiative, this campaign, we got these great ones. But then later on, when the next one's up, you can go back to it and be like, hey, we still got a plethora of great stories to use. So no, you can't have too many great stories, but you can have too many great stories in one video. Like I said, you don't want it to just become a stew of nothingness because there's too many voices and too many ideas in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know if you had any experience working or getting stories from people who had like some sort of like legal protection or anything. There was a question from Blakely about they work at an organization that works with foster care kids, so it's hard to get their stories because of the wards of the state. Do you have any suggestions about that?
Yeah, you can, there's a lot of ways to protect storytellers, especially when it comes to kids, minors, and things like that. You can still collect those stories. You can use them in other ways. Maybe video may not be the best way to put them out there. And obviously, always doing your best to protect identity and anonymity. You can do that. So, like maybe in a newsletter, maybe in a social media post, you change the name, but you can share the story that way. In video, you can always do things, there's a classic silhouette style. You can also, and we've done this, when we found a powerful story, we'll sometimes actually, bring in like a child actor, a young adult to be the stand-in, kind of the proxy for this person's story. We still change details to protect, our actual storytellers, but we still want to get some of these stories out there, but doing it in a safe, applicable and legal way that nothing will come back and harm anybody or affect them later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Corinne just mentioned that she also has a connection to working with foster care children, and then they actually interviewed the children as adults now, so that could be another
Yeah,
way.
I was gonna say again, building kind of a story vault, hold on to these stories. Maybe now's not the time for like one reason or another, but you can come back to them.
Yeah, and we're just at time, so maybe just this one final question about what software do you think is the easiest to turn the, if it's a video format, turn it into something shareable?
Like as far as doing discovery interviews or actually like recording the video itself? Because I mean, hey, in the early days of the pandemic, we were literally recording via Zoom and editing videos that way. We were using our software like Adobe Premiere. There's a lot of free editing software out there, but and everybody walks around with a great camera, usually in their pocket. So if you capture a story, with your phone, with whatever you've got, if it's a great story and people can understand it and see it even barely, you've probably got something there.
Yeah, yeah. And Dacia was asking, with having zero editing experience, so possibly something around editing.
Yeah, so in the book, we lay out kind of a methodical strategy for editing, and it's not based on any software, but it's a great approach for anybody new to editing to kind of get into it, to understand the rhythms and the process. So again, just shameless plugging my boss's book. It's in there for you.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Well, we put it in the chat. And so everyone here, please take advantage of that. And Jared, if people want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach out?
Storyfind.com.
Storyfind.com. All right. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much for being with us today and sharing all of your insight into getting great, amazing stories.
Of course, I loved it. I thank you all for just participating and attending. Thank you.
Bye.